From the outside, my relationship looked glamorous and effortless, but somewhere between private dinners and weekend houses I started feeling smaller every month. I did not expect loneliness to follow me into beautiful places. That part surprised me. When I first met Oliver, he spilled red wine on his own shoes trying to shake my hand. That was the first thing I liked about him. Not the family money, not the apartment overlooking the river. Just the fact that he looked embarrassed and laughed at himself instead of pretending nothing happened. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party. I was still finishing graduate school then, sharing a cramped apartment with two women who labeled leftovers with sticky notes because groceries had become weirdly political in our kitchen. Oliver arrived late wearing an expensive coat that somehow looked wrinkled. Everyone noticed him immediately. I mostly noticed that he kept standing near the dog instead of the louder people. He was easier than I expected. That became the dangerous part. Loving him felt natural almost immediately, and I think I trusted that feeling too quickly because I had spent years around emotionally unavailable men who treated affection like a reward system. Oliver did not play games. He called when he said he would. He remembered tiny details. He once drove 40 minutes at midnight because I mentioned cramps in passing and then showed up holding pharmacy painkillers and 3 different chocolate bars like he was over-preparing for an apocalypse. I loved him for that. I still do, which complicates everything. The problems started slowly, quietly. At first it was almost funny. The first dinner with his family felt like accidentally walking onto a movie set where everyone already knew the script except me. His mother asked if I liked skiing in Switzerland. I thought she meant once in a lifetime skiing, like a honeymoon destination people save for years to visit. Then his brother casually mentioned they usually spent Christmas there. Usually. I remember smiling too hard that night. My cheeks physically hurt afterward. I sat in the bathroom before bed staring at my reflection, thinking, you are behaving like an exchange student trying not to embarrass herself. And the humiliating thing was that nobody had actually been cruel to me. That almost made it worse. If they had looked down on me openly, I could have been angry. Instead they were generous, warm, curious. His mother hugged me goodbye and sent me home with pastries wrapped in linen cloth like I was already family. I cried in the taxi anyway, not because of them exactly, because I suddenly became aware of every invisible thing I had learned growing up. How my mother reused tea bags. How my father apologized before asking for help. How every vacation of my childhood involved a discount code. I started noticing differences everywhere after that. The way Oliver never checked prices at grocery stores. The way his friends ordered wine without discussing cost first. The way people around him talked about work, not as survival, as identity, passion, legacy. Meanwhile, I still had nightmares about overdraft fees. One evening we attended a birthday dinner for one of his friends. Everyone there seemed polished in an effortless way that made me irrationally irritated. One woman talked about buying a tiny apartment in Lisbon because she was bored of hotels. Tiny apartment. I spent 20 minutes pretending to read the menu because I suddenly could not contribute to a single conversation around me. Then I got angry at myself for being dramatic. Then angry at them for making me feel dramatic. Emotions kept folding into each other like laundry I never finished sorting. After dinner Oliver asked quietly, "You okay?" "Yeah, just tired." That became my answer for almost everything. I did not know how to explain that nothing specific was wrong, yet I constantly felt exposed. Like eventually someone would realize I did not belong there. Not because of money exactly. Something harder to define. Confidence maybe. Entitlement. The absence of fear. People with money moved through the world differently. Doors opened before they reached them. Problems sounded temporary when they spoke about them. I hated noticing that. It made me resentful in ugly little ways. Once Oliver complained because the internet at his parents' lake house stopped working for half a day. I snapped at him so suddenly even I felt shocked. "You'll survive." He stared at me. "Okay." The car ride afterward was painfully quiet. I spent the next hour feeling both justified and ashamed. Because the truth was, he had not actually done anything wrong. He was just frustrated about internet access like any normal person. But part of me wanted him to suffer occasionally, just enough to understand what constant financial anxiety felt like. I hated that thought the moment it appeared. At the same time, I kept collecting tiny humiliations. Not intentional humiliations. That's important. Just moments. Like when his father offered to connect me with someone higher up at a publishing company after hearing me complain about my contract job. He genuinely meant well. But I went home furious anyway because I had spent years trying to prove I could build a career myself. Or when Oliver surprised me with an expensive necklace on our anniversary and I could barely enjoy it because all I could think was, this probably cost more than my monthly rent used to. I thanked him too stiffly. He noticed. "You don't like it?" "No, I do." You looked upset. I'm not upset. But I was. Not at him. At myself for caring. At the necklace for symbolizing something I could not explain without sounding ungrateful. Part of me wanted to be chosen by this world. Another part wanted to reject it before it could reject me first. Around that time my friendships started changing too. That hurt more than I expected. My closest friends used to tell me everything. Breakups, money problems, family disasters. We had once shared a single grocery store birthday cake among 6 people because nobody could afford anything else. Now conversations felt strained. If I mentioned a trip with Oliver, somebody would joke about the rich people adventures. If I stayed quiet, they accused me of disappearing. I started censoring myself constantly. One night my friend Clara asked where Oliver and I spent the weekend. I hesitated for half a second too long. "See?" she laughed. "You literally think before talking to us now." Everyone laughed lightly but I felt heat crawl up my neck. I wanted to explain that I was trying not to sound unbearable. Instead I drank too much wine and got defensive. "You act like I joined a cult." "No," Clara said. "It just feels like you don't need us anymore." That sentence stayed with me for weeks. Because maybe there was some truth in it. Not the money part. The emotional part. I had become divided between worlds, and instead of handling it honestly I kept shape-shifting depending on the room. With my old friends I minimized my relationship. Around Oliver's family I minimized my background. After a while I barely knew which version of me was real. Then something happened that embarrassed me enough to force clarity. Oliver invited me to his cousin's engagement party at a huge house outside the city. Caterers, musicians, people wearing cream-colored linen like they had all coordinated accidentally. I spent 2 hours trying to act relaxed. At some point I overheard 2 women discussing schools for their future children. One casually said, "I just don't want them growing up around scarcity mentality." Scarcity mentality. I smiled politely while talking to someone else, but inside I felt this sharp ugly anger. As if my entire childhood had just been reduced to a psychological flaw. Later I locked myself in the bathroom and cried harder than I had in months. Not graceful crying either. The swollen-faced kind. And the humiliating thing was that nobody had actually insulted me directly. That sentence probably was not even meant cruelly. But suddenly I could hear my mother counting coins for gas again. I could see overdue notices on our kitchen counter. I could hear my father whispering at night because he thought I was asleep. Scarcity mentality. I sat on the bathroom floor thinking maybe love was not enough when 2 people carried completely different histories inside them. When I came out, Oliver found me near the back garden smoking a cigarette even though I had quit years ago. "You smoke now?" he asked. Apparently. He stood beside me quietly for a minute. Then he said, "You disappear around my family." I laughed a little. "That's dramatic." "You do." There was no accusation in his voice. Somehow that made me more emotional. "I'm trying," I said. "I know. I don't think you do." He rubbed his forehead the way he always did when tired. "Then explain it to me." And suddenly I was angry again because I did not know how. How do you explain the exhaustion of constantly translating yourself? How do you explain feeling grateful and resentful at the same time? How do you explain that kindness can still make you feel small sometimes? Instead, I said something unfair. "You've never had to think about any of this." He looked away immediately. That was the moment I knew I hurt him. Because the truth was more complicated. Oliver had his own fractures. His father controlled people through generosity. His older brother barely spoke to the family anymore. His mother drank too much at parties and became strangely critical by midnight. Oliver himself avoided conflict so intensely he sometimes disappeared emotionally for days instead of admitting he was upset. But I had flattened him into a symbol because it was easier than admitting my insecurity. That night we drove home mostly silent. At a red light he suddenly said, very quietly, "Sometimes I think you only see what I have, not who I am." I wanted to argue immediately. Instead I stared out the window because part of me feared he was right. The worst part is that I loved him deeply. Still, maybe that was why everything hurt so much. A few weeks later I found myself alone at his parents' house while everyone else prepared dinner outside. I was helping his mother slice peaches in the kitchen. Out of nowhere she said, "The first years were hard for me too." I looked at her, confused. She smiled faintly. "I married into this family. I wasn't born into it." That surprised me enough I almost dropped the knife. Then she shrugged and added, "You never fully stop feeling observed. You just get tired of performing eventually." It was such a small sentence. She went right back to cutting fruit afterward like she had not changed something in me slightly. Not healed, just shifted. That night I watched everyone through the window before joining them outside. Oliver was arguing badly with his cousin about charcoal. His father had sauce on his shirt. Somebody dropped a plate. Somebody else swore loudly. For the first time, they looked less like a world I needed to earn entry into and more like people. Messy people. Lucky people. Sometimes careless people. Just people. I still do not fully know where I belong inside all of it. Some days I still feel defensive before dinners. Sometimes I still rehearse stories in my head to make myself sound less provincial, less nervous. Sometimes I resent Oliver for things he never chose. And sometimes I catch myself enjoying it too much. The comfort, the ease, the beautiful spaces. Then guilt arrives immediately afterward like an old reflex. None of it resolved neatly. But a few nights ago, Oliver fell asleep on the couch with his reading glasses crooked across his face and one sock half off. And I stood there looking at him thinking how strange it was that love could feel both safe and destabilizing at the same time. I covered him with a blanket anyway. Then I turned off the kitchen light and stood there a moment longer than necessary, listening to the quiet house, still not entirely sure who I had become inside it.